Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at something that is, honestly, truly fascinating. We've got 12 seemingly unrelated historical and philosophical sources here. We're talking everything from ancient scripture and Renaissance-era treatises right up to modern parenting reflections and Zen-adjacent parables. But here's the absolute magic of it all. They all converge on one profound, inescapable idea. The atmospheric theme binding all this together is that the moment finds you before you find it, and the only real choice you ever get is whether or not to answer.
So let's start here. Look at this incredibly powerful quote from the Book of Esther, which was brought to our attention by Hall of Fame coach Tony Dungy. Mordecai asks Queen Esther this chilling question, and notice how little agency it actually gives her. Esther didn't go out seeking a crisis to prove herself against. She was already queen when the crisis knocked on her door. Her courage wasn't born out of her own initiative. It was a forced response. She could have stayed silent inside the palace, just hoping the whole thing would blow over. But Mordecai's warning completely strips away that illusion of safety. If she did nothing, the danger was still coming. Section 1. When the moment arrives.
The brutal, inescapable reality we see across all these sources is that moments choose us. We literally don't choose them. And when that moment actually arrives, silence is absolutely never a neutral option. Consider Pastor Martin Niemöller's famous accounting from the Holocaust. First they came for the communists, then the Jews, then the trade unionists, and finally, there was no one left to speak for him. It's essentially the exact same warning given to Esther, just restated as arithmetic. Keeping your head down isn't some private, victimless posture, it's really just a slower form of the exact same danger. Given enough time, it eventually reaches everyone, including the person who thought they were somehow exempt.
Now let's zoom out and look at this on a civilizational scale. As George Raveling points out in his meditation on the Declaration of Independence, the signers who pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, they weren't inherently superhuman figures magically elevated by history. They were just ordinary men who simply happened to be standing inside a moment that demanded something massive of them. And when history asked, they chose not to step back. The moment doesn't select for greatness, it simply asks. And greatness is just what we call the people who actually happen to answer it.
Moving on to Section 2. The Cost of Leadership.
This brings us to a really fascinating paradox about power. Human nature almost always gravitates towards seeking gain and permanent control. But true leadership, it often demands voluntary surrender. Think about George Washington being offered a crown and just declining it, choosing a quiet life at Mount Vernon instead of permanent power. When the moment truly arrives, it rarely offers you a shiny reward. Usually, it offers a severe cost. Absorbing that cost and actively refusing power is without a doubt one of the rarest acts in human history.
Washington's decision connects perfectly with this easily overlooked fragment from Confucius. A crown is certainly pleasant, right? Almost anyone else would have taken it in a heartbeat. But as Confucius says, if you try to please the superior man in a way that is not accordant with right, he won't be pleased. For Washington, integrity wasn't just stubbornness, it was a filter. Only what is fundamentally right gets through, regardless of how incredibly attractive the alternative might look.
Which leads us to Section 3. Beware the wolves.
We need to introduce a bit of a philosophical twist right here, because there is a serious danger in having a righteous cause without the character to actually carry it. Anthony DeMello poses this brilliant question. If a million wolves were to organize for justice, would they cease to be a million wolves? It's a striking thought, isn't it? This sets up a crucial realization. Just because you find yourself positioned for such a time as this absolutely does not guarantee your virtue. It's really just a description of where you happen to be standing on the board.
So, here's the absolute core of it, the difference between ideology and character. The ideology, the cause, doesn't do the work for you. It doesn't magically purify whoever happens to be carrying it. Rather, the cause simply acts as an amplifier for the character of the person holding it.
Let's look back at the story of Esther for a second. Haman, the man whose hatred nearly destroyed the Jewish people, was also positioned by circumstance to act with massive consequence. He and Esther occupied the very same book, actually, the exact same historical moments, but they ended up in completely opposite places. Why? Because the moment doesn't make you righteous. It just turns up the volume on who you already are.
Section 4. Strength and embodied conviction.
To actually make that right choice when your moment arrives, you need an underlying foundation. I absolutely love this quote from Pavel Tsatsouline. Sparta, Rome, the Knights of Europe worship strength, because it is strength that makes all other values possible. This is completely foundational. Without the underlying physical, material, or mental strength to actually absorb a cost. Noble ideals like courage, mercy, and justice, they're just empty sentiments. You have to have a load-bearing structure beneath your beliefs, or they just collapse under pressure, leaving you as nothing more than a wolf with a righteous slogan.
Author Robert Greene frames how we actually transmit this kind of strength and conviction to other people. The hard sell relies on argumentative, direct, forceful persuasion. But even when its content is completely true, it breeds suspicion because, let's face it, people resist being visibly managed. The soft sell, on the other hand, is atmospheric. It lets good feelings take the stage, and, most importantly, it embodies conviction rather than just loudly arguing for it.
This Chinese proverb captures the idea so beautifully. Not the cry, but the flight of a wild duck leads the flock to fly and follow. A duck doesn't yell instructions to the rest of the flock. It just flies, and the flock instinctually follows the flight itself. People are exactly the same way. We naturally resist being managed, but we readily, almost instinctually, follow genuine, embodied action.
We see this embodied conviction perfectly in Franklin Roosevelt's famous fireside chat, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." George Raveling points out a truly brilliant insight here. Those words didn't persuade a terrified, frightened nation just because it was a clever line written by a speechwriter. They worked because FDR truly meant them. Conviction that is merely asserted invites resistance, but conviction that is physically demonstrated, that is genuinely felt, that is what actually moves people to follow.
Finally, Section 5, the everyday custodian.
Okay, we've talked a lot about civilizational history, presidents, and queens, but how does this apply intimately in our own daily lives? This is the descent from the monumental right down to the anonymous. The soldier on the beaches of Normandy, the teacher standing up in Birmingham, the firefighter climbing the stairs on September 11th. These are everyday heroes who simply declined to take the easy exit when history knocked on their door. They didn't have permanent power or fancy crowns. They just had a moment that asked something of them, and they stood up to answer it.
Author Ryan Holiday brings this right into our living rooms using, of all things, this beautiful lyric from Alanis Morissette. "My mission is to keep the light in your eyes ablaze." Our daily duty, especially if you're a parent or a mentor, is not about grand self-advancement, it's custodianship. It's a willingness to absorb the costs of a dark world so that the fundamental goodness, innocence, and light in our children doesn't have to. We carry the fire for them.
Psychologist Philip Zimbardo wraps this whole concept up with a really profound realization on heroism. He says heroism isn't rare because the noble act is hard to imagine. It's rare because the easier, gravity-following alternative is always right there in front of you. Think about it. Esther could have stayed silent. Washington could have kept the crown. Every single everyday hero we just listed had an easier exit available to them, but they chose not to take it. Lao Tzu provides a simple but literally brilliant framework for navigating this. If you are depressed, you're living in the past. If you are anxious, you're living in the future. If you are at peace, you are in the present. This isn't just philosophy, by the way. It's highly practical instruction on how to actually answer the call. Esther couldn't have acted from past fears of what happened to others, nor from future anxieties about the consequences. She had exactly one moment available to her, the present, and she had to act from entirely inside it. Which leaves us with this final, powerful realization. The connective tissue under everything we've looked at today is this. The moment is never abstract. It is always this one. It is arriving right now, asking only what you are going to do with it. So, when your moment finds you, and believe me, it will find you, will you take the easy exit, or will you have the strength and character to answer the call? Thank you so much for exploring these incredible sources with me, and I challenge you to take this wisdom and truly embody it today.